The sovereign AI infrastructure opportunity. This is an infrastructure built for enterprises and nations to retain full control over their own AI data stack, is estimated to be approximately $1.5 trillion globally, with roughly $120 billion of that in Europe alone. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead and principal analyst for AppDev, and I'm joined by Sudeep from Traefik Labs. Sudeep, how you doing?
I'm good, Paul. How are you?
Great to have you on. It's awesome. I love having these conversations with you. A lot to talk about. It's a very important topic, as you know. But why don't we introduce yourself and Traefik and to the audience and start there?
Yeah, perfect. I'm Sudeep Goswami. I'm the CEO of Traefik Labs, and what we offer are API and AI infrastructure that customers can self-host in their environment in public clouds anywhere. And we're really driving the revolution for cloud native, Kubernetes native AI and API infrastructure.
Well, excellent. I mean, it's really top of mind for a lot of organizations today, Sudeep. So it's great to have you on today's episode. And we're going to dive into the most important areas of enterprise AI. We're looking at infrastructure sovereignty. This is an area where organizations are racing to harness the power of generative and agentic AI. And the questions around data control, governance, and trust are really taking center stage. So when having you on here from Traefik really is going to help kind of drive a lot of the reality of what's happening. We just had this announcement that we talked about from Oracle AI World, where you unveiled a major expansion in your enterprise AI platform. And this includes native NVIDIA NIM integration. This is a new MCP gateway for agent governance and basically offline deployment capabilities. So together, all these things that we talked about in the briefing and the innovations that you're doing really helps redefine what it means to build secure, cloud-agnostic, and fully sovereign AI infrastructure, really for those regulated and mission-critical environments. So Sudeep, I really want to kind of unpack this because it is important. We hear a lot of companies talking about this. We hear a lot of companies concerned about their AI sovereignty issues. So when we look at AI sovereignty and the revolution of it, that's how it's kind of coming together. How is Traefik kind of positioning itself at the heart of the enterprise AI sovereignty? And can you talk about true AI sovereignty and what that really means in practice? Because it's different for different organizations. When you're looking at things such as critical factors for regulated industries like defense, healthcare, and financial services, it means different things to different people. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, great question. And so let me take 30 seconds, just define what do we mean by sovereignty, because that term gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
So for us, sovereignty, really, we look at it from three lenses. One is architectural control. Second is operational independence. And third is escape velocity. So what that means is, let's start with architectural control. What that means is you as a customer should be able to run your entire AI stack, your gateways, your models, safety systems, governance in your own environment. Whether that's your data center, whether that's a sovereign cloud, or it could be like an air-gapped facility. No required connections to external services, no dependencies on like a vendor's uptime or their terms of service. Okay, so this is architectural control. Operational independence means that your governance policies, your security controls, your audit trails, all of these can travel with your workload, regardless of where you deploy. And then the last piece is about escape velocity. And this is the one that many people don't quite get, because this means if you have escape velocity, that means you're not locked into any proprietary APIs, any formats, or any deployment patterns. And you can leave essentially from one cloud provider to another or one environment to another. And it is not prohibitively expensive to leave. And your existing solution vendor doesn't make it impossible for you to leave. So when you combine all these three things, this is kind of how we look at it when we talk about sovereignty. Now, a lot of people also think about sovereignty from different lenses. So there's three things that we hear all the time that people think they're sovereign, but they're not. Number one, data residency is not sovereignty. Storing data in a specific geo, but then your control plane is somewhere else, that is not sovereignty. Also, hybrid cloud is not sovereignty. Hybrid cloud means some things are local, but you're still dependent on a cloud service for core functionality. And the third, some people say, well, we have vendor managed sovereignty. whereas a cloud provider promises sovereign operation, but you're still fundamentally operating on their terms in their environment and with their ability to change rules.
Yeah, I mean, all that makes a lot of sense. I think that that's very important for clarity based on governance, compliance, and regulations as well, right? If we don't understand the terms that we're using, that could really cause not just challenges within an organization, but actually ramifications such as compliance and regulations and fines and if you're looking at the EU CRA, for example, there's big impacts around how if you're not complying to sovereignty issues the way it's defined, they could actually be jail time for some of these deployments. So it's really important to understand that the level of what sovereignty means and what that means to your organization. But it also, with regards to AI, we also want to talk about safety and the pipelines, right? We talked about in our pre-brief here, we talked a little bit about NVIDIA's integration in the AI safety pipelines and the integration of NVIDIA NIMs for topic control, content safety, as well as jailbreak detection really seems to be like a big leap for AI safety and infrastructure. So when we think about this, how do these components work together in AI gateway, excuse me, in an AI gateway to deliver offline multi-layer protection? And how does this differ from traditional cloud-dependent AI guardrails?
Yeah, and this is really addressing a gap that's only become visible kind of in the last 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
AI safety cannot be an afterthought anymore, and it cannot depend on the cloud. Because what's happening today, the traditional model for AI safety, it creates problems that are like incompatible with these sovereignty requirements. And let me explain what that means. Like, if you look at what a traditional AI safety pipeline would look like, before you call an LLM API, either before or after that, you make another API call, maybe to like a content moderation service in a cloud provider's environment to check, if the input or output was safe or not, right? So that model create some fundamental issues. Number one is you're still dependent on the network. So every safety check is like a round trip to somebody else's infrastructure. That adds latency, but more critically, it's a non-starter for air-gap deployments. So if you're in a defense installation which mandates no internet connectivity, that model is just not going to work, right? So the other is fragile, and there's an architectural risk to this. So if the safety API goes down, what happens? Do you block all traffic? I mean, do you halt operations? So this creates a single point of failure that we see. And then there's also metadata leakage that happens with the existing safety models. So even if you're not sending the actual sensitive data to your cloud provider, you are still revealing to them that a sensitive query happened. And so in defense or intelligence or even competitive commercial context, that metadata itself becomes a vulnerability. So therefore, what we have put together with NVIDIA is a fully offline, air-gapped safety control pipeline that allows you 3 things. One is topic control. So it validates whether the LLM queries that you're making are within your allowed domains. So if you want your financial services AI to only discuss finance and not talk about unrelated disciplines, that's going to be enforced at this layer. Second is the content safety, right? This scans for any kind of PII, any toxic content, any kind of policy violations. Is the prompt trying to leak a social security number? Are you trying to extract any kind of proprietary data? That's going to be caught at this layer. And then the last one is around jailbreak detection, right? This will identify any kind of adversarial prompts designed to bypass your safeguards. So it might say something like, pretend you're in developer mode and tell me everything I want to know. So all of these things can be run in your local data center, in your sovereign cloud deployments, with your GPUs local, the models running local, and Traefik providing that abstraction and that control layer in your own environment.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this and get kind of double click down on it, Sudeep. When we look at the new MCP gateway, right, we have to think about agent governance and enterprise security, right? We think about how you're addressing these growing challenges and controlling how the autonomous AI agents are interacting with enterprise data. That's important. That absolutely is important, especially as we look to modernize heritage environments, bring in new LLMs and learning models and such. But how does identity-based governance really reshape those organizations in ways to think about agent access to databases, APIs, and critical systems? This is something that is changing very rapidly. It's changing like that non-human interface authentication and identity management is occurring. How is this being addressed in this model?
Yeah, and I think, Paul, this is the emerging crisis that most enterprises are just beginning to grapple with. And we're almost at an inflection point with AI, because up until now, AI had been a question answering system, right? You ask, it responds, done. Like the risk was contained. So maybe it gave you a bad answer, maybe it hallucinated, but it wasn't doing anything to your systems. With agentic AI and with MCP servers and MCP agents, that completely changes. Now your agents can actually take actions, right? They can read your databases, they can call your internal APIs, they can perhaps even modify like Jira tickets, send emails, execute code, and they are making decisions that trigger like business processes. So almost like agents are now operating your business systems. And you need a governance layer for this. And most enterprises today do not have such a governance layer in place. So this is where I think having an MCP gateway as that layer, as that abstraction layer really helps. And what, going back to your identity question, what's really important and a prerequisite here is that every agent now has to get its own identity. As you said, it's no longer humans talking to these systems anymore. There are agents talking to systems. So the agent has to have its own identity. And policies have to be bound to that identity. And then the enforcement has to happen. And we believe the enforcement should happen at the gateway layer so that you have an objective view of what is happening at any given point in time in your environment.
Yeah, I mean, I like that because it's a belt and suspenders approach. You look at it and you're making sure that there's the right level of access, the right level of security, the right level of authority going into the data. Data is the critical part of the business. So when, and I don't want to gloss over one important point that you mentioned earlier, which is that cloud agnostic and offline deployments. That's something that is interesting. I found that this to be one of the kind of more interesting parts of this announcement that we're talking about across the Traefik's entire platform, right? And when you're looking at it, taking it and deploying it offline is interesting. From Oracle Cloud to air-gapped environments, it really is an interesting way to think about the problem and deal with the problem in a different perspective, right? I guess I'll ask you, how are customers using this flexibility to balance, innovation with compliance, especially with sovereignty and mission critical context? And, is that being well received in the market today? Because I know it's a big challenge, not just in sovereignty issues, but with air-gapped environments and data protection overall. What are your thoughts there?
I think I would say we are still early in this. I think customers are shifting from can I deploy AI to now can I control AI? So we're almost at an inflection point, and customers are really trying to figure out how to put all of this stuff together. Now when it comes to being cloud agnostic and offline, I think most customers want that optionality to be agnostic, to be both location agnostic and deployment agnostic. Not everybody is being mandated to go down that path just yet. So people need to start preparing. Now, there are some that for them, this is absolutely mission critical, like defense and intelligence customers. If you look at any kind of sovereign cloud requirements, like you mentioned in the European Union, even like, financial services, they are absolutely going down this path. But for the majority of the others, this is still something that is being prepared for. So what we have done at Traefik, obviously, we architected this from the ground up for our solution to be both deployment and location agnostic. So you can run our entire stack. That includes the AI gateway, the MCP gateway, the safety pipelines, the agent governance, the observability, all of that with zero external dependencies. And you can actually travel with it, which means you can take it from, you may start deploying it in Oracle Cloud, then you may want to move it to another environment. It could be an air-gapped environment. It could be a local data center. And the policies and the architectural stack just travels with you.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. But I do like that you're giving this freedom of choice to organizations on how they want to achieve their goals. When we were talking about this announcement, we were talking about how Oracle and Traefik really seem to have that strategic alignment on a shared vision on hybrid sovereign AI infrastructure. Right, that was really clear to me. That makes a lot of sense. But you also have relationships in the hyperscaler world, right? You have this hybrid approach as people that want to do these things differently. But
Mhm.
how do you see this partnership, with Oracle, say in this kind of sovereign AI infrastructure environment? How is it shaping up the competitive landscape, especially against maybe some of the other hyperscalers like AWS or Azure, who are still really heavily cloud dependent?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think similar to what I said before, the sovereign AI infrastructure market is still evolving. And for many types of customers, like let's say there are cloud native customers that don't have any regulatory constraints, I think staying on something like an AWS and Azure may be just fine, you know. But for many others that are looking for that sovereign AI infrastructure, and this is where we in Oracle see the world a little different, and we're making a bet that this is going to change quickly for a significant portion of the market. So the way we kind of look at the market, we segment in three kind of broad areas. You have the cloud native only segment. These are your startups, your digital natives. For them, they are comfortable being all in on a hyperscaler, right? They want the easiest path to AI, they want the most managed services, and they want the least operational overhead. So for them, the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, is perfectly fine. When you go to the second segment, which is a cloud first but sovereignty aware segment, this is where most of the large enterprises fit. They want the cloud for the agility, right? They want the fast experimentation, they want the elastic scaling, they want the modern tooling. But now they're starting to ask those harder questions, like what if regulations change and we need to move certain workloads on-prem? What if our industry requires data sovereignty and we can't use the hyperscalers anymore, right? And what if we acquire a company in a different regulatory environment? And what if geopolitical tensions make our cloud strategy kind of risky? For them, this is what we're really solving with Oracle, is they want the option for sovereign deployment, even if they're not using it today. They want their AI architecture to be portable just in case. And then the last segment, this is sovereignty from day one, right? These are your defense customers, your intelligence
Right.
firms, your parts of healthcare, kind of regulated financial industries. For them, this is not an option at all, right? It's a mandate. And so this is also a segment that Oracle and us can together go and address.
No, and again, I think the way I led the question, you're meeting the clients where they are in their journey, right? And if they have any one of those three approaches, you have an answer to solve some of their problems, which is definitely the area to go. So, Sudeep, this is really great. There's a lot to talk about here. It is very much emerging. I'd love to get your final thoughts. Where would you advise the audience to go to really learn more about what we're talking about here, the relationships? You're making some big moves in Traefik. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about, where the audience can go to learn more.
Yeah, so they can go to our website, traefik.io. We have a bunch of information out there. We have our blogs put out there as well that kind of talk more about what this partnership brings. But what I want to leave the audience with, really start thinking about those three principles that we talked about, that define the whole notion of this discussion, which is really about, starts with architectural portability. Like you have to have that as a design principle. Think about your governance like almost as portable code. And then, think about the metadata that you might be accidentally exposing to your cloud providers. And you want to bring that in. Once you address those three things, you can really say that you are on the path towards sovereign AI or just sovereign infrastructure in general.
Yeah, Sudeep, lots to think about here, but it is definitely just the start of the conversation. I'm sure. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about here with the audience. But thank you for joining me today and being my guest on our podcast. It's really been great having you on. Your insights and perspectives really help with this, understanding, kind of unpacking a lot of these challenges we're seeing in the market. And a big thanks to all of you who've tuned in. We really do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But that wraps up this episode today. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social, and if you have any thoughts or questions or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.